The role of communications in advancing the global agenda and how Laos, the country chairing ASEAN, envisions the future for the world. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. How important is the media in promoting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and how social media can be a tool for good, but also at the same time is being used to disseminate fake news? We will hear from the head of UN Communications, Melissa Fleming, later in the show. But first, my colleague Jim Spellman spoke with the Laos Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, Saleumxay Kommasith, about the challenges and opportunities for the country.
Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us, how is Laos aligning its national development goals with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and what international assistance do you need?
Well, since the SDG or MDG in the past was endorsed by the United Nations, the Lao government attached great importance to the implementation of this SDG. In a way that the government has streamlined all the SDG goals into our national socio-economic development, such as the eighth and the ninth five-year socio-economic development. So it means that we integrate international development goal into our national development goal. Implementing national development goals would signify the effective implementation of international goals. So that has been the case in the Lao PDR. Of course, the Lao government alone would not be able to implement all those SDG because it is an international development goal. It requires an extensive support and cooperation by international community. On top of that, the Lao government has localized SDG into our national development goal. We propose SDG 18, which is focusing on addressing the impact of unexploded ordnance or cluster munitions. So now only 6 years remain towards 2030. But we look at the full implementation not only at the national level, but at the international level, that is still lacking behind. So the Lao government would call upon international community to step up its measures to support developing countries in order for us, not only for Lao PDR, but also countries across the world to be able to implement SDG by 2030.
Beyond just the development aspect, what is the Lao government doing to fight climate change and build resilience?
Well, the Lao government has embarked on a long-term development strategies and sustainable development strategies. For instance, we aim to achieve zero emission by 2050, which is aligned with international agenda and commitment in addressing the issue of climate change. Apart from that, the government has adopted a number of national measures such as mitigation and adaptation measures to make sure that the Lao government not only be able to achieve international recognized climate change goal, but also helping the country to benefit from all measures that the international community provided to developing countries. The Lao government, apart from that, at the national level, has embarked on the strategies of sustainable green and clean economy over the next 10 years and beyond.
Laos holds the rotating chairmanship of ASEAN. What have your priorities been in that role, and how do you see the larger issue of stability and cooperation in Southeast Asia?
This year, 2024, Laos assumed chairmanship of ASEAN and we have chosen the theme of ASEAN chairmanship as enhancing connectivity and resilience. So these are the goal and objective of our chairmanship 2024. We see connectivity as essential for development of the countries, and this suits the objective of ASEAN connectivity. So this also would help and help the countries, not only among ASEAN, but help ASEAN countries connect with broader international community. On the other hand, enhancing resilience, because at the current situations that are happening at the regional and international level, resilience can play an important role, not only for ASEAN, but others. We are facing a number of issues, geopolitical rivalry across the world, the climate change, natural disasters that are happening across the world. I mean, just a few weeks ago, countries in ASEAN are facing extensive flooding because of typhoon as a result of climate change that happening in the world. So we would lead ASEAN in terms of promoting connectivity and promoting resilience in an objective to build ASEAN community in the next decade and on.
One of the things that is very interesting is the development of the China-Laos Railway. People are very excited about this. What are the next steps for that line, and how will it boost your country economically through trade as well as tourism?
Lao-China high-speed railways is crucial for our socio-economic development, and I believe that it is not only benefiting Laos and China, but also it's connecting countries neighboring Laos as well as broader countries in the region. This project is one of the good example that aligns with the One Belt One Road initiative proposed by President Xi Jinping 10 years ago, and this can be one of the successful projects in Belt and Road initiative proposed by President Xi Jinping, as I said earlier. In the coming years, I think based on this foundation, this successful story of Belt and Road initiative project, we are working closely with China, with our neighboring countries like Vietnam and other ASEAN countries. We hope that the project would be extended to our neighboring countries. For instance, now the Thai government is working with China to have an extended high-speed railway from Laos to Thailand, and that would be further down to the south of Thailand, connect to Malaysia and Singapore. That is the future that we can envisage that this project can provide. And of course, that would meet the demands even of our ASEAN chairmanship objective, that is enhancing connectivity and resilience.
You could eventually have direct rail access to a port. That would really help trade, I would imagine.
Yes, that would be in the pipeline that the Lao government is trying to work with our neighboring countries. We are talking about here the north-south and east-west economic corridor. North-south, it means extending from China to Laos down to one way down to Cambodia and to Ho Chi Minh City of Vietnam, and the other way is through from Laos, from China, Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, and down to Singapore. So that would really provide an opportunity not only for Laos to connect with our neighboring countries and countries in the region, but also it would provide Laos to get access to the seaport. That means would eventually materialize the Lao government's vision to turn the countries from a landlocked into a connectivity hub.
Earlier this year, you met with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and you expressed your support for the One China policy. Why is that important in that relationship, and why is that important for broader security throughout the region?
Well, China, when become member of United Nations back in early 70s, United Nations also recognized China, and not only United Nations, but member of United Nations recognize One China policies. This is a principle. This is a principle. Laos has pursued very consistent foreign policies, not only in relation to China, but also to other countries. One China policies is a principle, and we would pursue that. And we support this policy. It means we support the principle and international law and instrument. One China policies is not just written in paper. It has to be implemented effectively. And all international community and all member states of the United Nations should also follow and be consistent in implementing once it's come to relations with China as a whole.
And this year marks the 15th anniversary of the establishment of the China-Laos Comprehensive Strategic Cooperative Partnership. How do you assess the overall relationship between China and Laos?
Laos and China has enjoyed a very cordial and close relations. We upgraded our relations several times. Once from long-lasting strategic partnership to China-Laos community of shared future of community of shared future. So this has been the fundamental for Laos and China to forge further bilateral relations and cooperation. We have our leaders have late last year signed the second framework of cooperation in terms of Laos and China future of shared destiny. This would really constitute a cornerstone in Laos and China relation and cooperation. And we are gearing up for the commemoration of this event in the coming years. And we believe that Laos and China is working together is not only for the bilateral cooperation, but it's also a contribution to maintenance and promotion of peace and security and international cooperation in the broader sense.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
How can powerful storytelling help the United Nations achieve the Sustainable Development Goals? My colleague Elaine Reyes sat down with the Under-Secretary General for Global Communications at the UN, Melissa Fleming.
Under-Secretary General Fleming, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Elaine.
How is the United Nations using its communication platforms to promote awareness and action towards achieving the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, we're using them in multiple ways. I mean, first, just to get out the facts, the facts around inequalities, the facts around climate change, what's happening in wars, and also the facts around the solutions. But just putting out the facts, if you're trying to move hearts and minds, isn't quite enough. So we're deploying a lot of storytelling, content, campaign material to reach people in ways that we hope will get them to care, but also get them to act. So it's a challenge in today's world where people are bombarded with all kinds of information and disinformation too. So trying to get into those spaces with authoritative information, but also the types of content that is going to move people into realizing that the world is in trouble, but they can also join forces with us to help us fix it.
Because the SDGs have been around for quite some time. I mean, it's not you were just over 5 years into reaching 2030. So have you had to change the way and evolve the way you communicate the information around them?
Yeah, I mean, I still think there's a lot of educating to do around the SDGs and what each goal represents. I mean, they're very bold visions, you know, no hunger, for example, quality education for all. What does that mean? And to really describe the kinds of programs that are happening all over the world. UN country offices in virtually every developing country, in every fragile country, even middle-income country around the world, working with governments, working with civil society to help them build plans to, you know, lift their countries according to the Sustainable Development Goal model. And they've, you know, then to help try to attract the kind of investment and finance that is needed. So it's, you know, on one hand, these are, you know, very aspirational goals, and we say that we've only reached 17% of them, and we only have 6 years to go. We can say all of that, but we also need to, you know, describe how we're making progress. What are examples of solutions that have really taken off in some countries? Where have actually the solutions bubbled up from the hyper-local level or the local level, and can we tell the world about those stories so others can perhaps learn from them?
You mentioned disinformation. Misinformation seems to be this major problem these days. You see it everywhere online. People have a hard time discerning what is true and what's not. With now AI involved, how are you trying to navigate all of that?
It's hard. I mean, we have described our information environments as being polluted, much like our natural environments are polluted. And if people can't live a healthy life if they are existing in an information ecosystem that is toxic, that is polarizing, where lies sometimes are elevated above facts. We believe every single human being, and this is part of human rights, the Human Declaration of Human Rights, have a right to receive information, not only to impart information, but also to receive quality information. And so we did an exercise over the last couple of years to kind of survey the world, survey our offices, talk to stakeholders all over the world, and ask them, what is it like trying to make progress on the SDGs in this kind of toxic information environment? All of them said it has become so difficult because people are mistrusting what we say. They're mistrusting us and our motives. So we have to work on the information environment if we're going to work on everything else. And that's something that I'm really proud that my team and I put out into the world, UN Global Principles on Information Integrity, which is kind of a blueprint on how to address our information ecosystems, how to restore them to better health.
What would you say the international media's role is in helping the United Nations get that information out correctly to its populations around the world?
Huge, huge role. A healthy information ecosystem has public interest media, independent, free media at its heart. A place where the public can turn to get authoritative, trusted information to guide them, covering the UN, covering our reports. I mean, we are behind some of the data that no one else is producing about, you know, what is happening in the far reaches of the world. We have humanitarians in war zones where there are no journalists. We have the statistics of human suffering. We have the data around climate change. But also, you know, we have solutions. And I think that's really fantastic to see this kind of embrace of media going forward, taking on a kind of solutions journalism approach, adding that dimension, not just uncovering everything that's wrong, but maybe saying, oh, somebody has solved it somewhere, or somebody from the UN has a call to action, has a proposal for how we can get out of this mess.
We do see the headlines and what gets covered in the UN Security Council by the day. Obviously, UNGA is a huge news cycle during the year, but what would you say are the issues that do not get covered and need more attention the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate. I mean, you asked the question also what the news media can do to help us explain the UN. I think most people think the UN is the Security Council, but the UN is very complex. It's not easy to understand, and it has a secretariat and agencies that are separate from these political bodies. So blaming the UN for not stopping a war is sometimes too simple. So we would hope that beyond those headlines of the breaking news of the crisis of the moment, it could also, be a little context could be put into these stories. But there are lots of stories that aren't covered, and it pains us. That's why we have UN News, and why we try to bring out those stories and also make footage and photography and voices available to news organizations who are unable to travel, maybe for financial reasons, to these places, and that they can still cover the story. One example is the war in Sudan. It's a forgotten war, and yet it is probably the war it is definitely the war that is causing the most death, the most hunger, the most displacement of any war today. So we are constantly, trying to get the media to cover it, and failing that, we try to do what we can ourselves, to raise our voices via social media, to put out packages to cover the UN officials who are traveling there, to hold events and try to get voices from Sudan. There was one here this week, a very high-profile event on Sudan that I had the privilege to moderate, and the most moving moment was when a young Sudanese activist who was part of the protest movement gave this just stirring speech, and in the end all of the delegates got up and applauded. I hope that made the news, but we try.
We hear about AI all the time. It's everywhere now, and there's always a certain fear of the unknown. Have you thought about if and how you would use AI in your global communications?
Yeah, and that's interesting because there's a lot of excitement around the UN about AI. Interesting because, of course, what we hear most of is the potential for destroying us all, or existential risk of AI. But there's a lot of excitement in people at WHO, people at ITU, people involved in education. They really believe that these applications can help, particularly in the developing world, can help advance the SDGs and some of our efforts. So that's great. On communications, we are looking at how we can use AI to help become maybe more multilingual in the way our capabilities of communicating with more people around the world. Just like journalists, maybe using it to help us get ideas and creative ideas for storytelling. But one thing that we've really discovered is we still need a human hand. The subjects that we deal with are so sensitive. But, we are experimenting in our library with like an AI assistant, so people could ask research questions to our library, and an AI assistant could find and dig through whatever is digitized in the library and come out with that. So I think there are applications that are positive. I have to say that we're spending a lot of time warning about the dangers of AI in the dimensions of disinformation, deep fakes, how they could have a negative influence on elections and on the vulnerable people that we're so concerned about protecting, young girls, women, politicians, and this deepfake pornography is becoming a big problem. So we're trying to embrace the potential advantages of AI while warning against the dark side. And just finally, there is another development here in the UN. As you saw, you covered that a global digital compact was adopted here at the UN during the Summit of the Future. And the Secretary General also has an AI advisory body. There is a recognition that we're in a situation again where there are a few rich companies that are developing the technology at a scale and a speed that the rest of the world can't keep up with. At the moment, there is no real governance, and that there is a recognition among all member states that there needs to be a global, at least not necessarily, regulation, but certainly governance, kind of like we have for climate change, an IPCC-like body for AI, so that everyone has access to the research, the developments, so that there's transparency, and then perhaps some recommendations for guardrails.
I mean, you mentioned access. Much of the world in rural areas can't even get on the internet. So there's that part of it. And also, to our conversation, getting information to some of those areas, there's a huge digital divide. How are you trying to navigate that? As technology is speeding so fast, and here we are, some people can't even get information.
It is, and this has been a real concern of the UN for a long time, particularly agencies like the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, that has been for years working on and advocating for bridging the digital divide, connecting people everywhere. And this is a huge inequality. It's leaving millions and millions of people out of our opportunities that we all enjoy. So the Global Digital Compact does address this, and there is hope that there will be, renewed push for even more possibility that just the basics, as you say, first of all, get people connected. Secondly, train them. There is in the Global Digital Compact an idea to have an AI fund that would enable the training of people, scientists, young people on AI, so that they can develop their own systems for their own countries, for their own needs. So I would say the UN is the only place in the world right now who is truly concerned, day in and day out, with getting the rest of the world connected, bringing up these inequalities and providing the opportunities that AI could bring that the rest of the world already has or will have faster than anyone else.
Under Secretary General Melissa Fleming, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.